Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Alec, and I'm going to be here in the background to help answer any of your technical or general questions. But before we get started, I'm going to go over a couple things that you'll have throughout the session. There is no dial-in number for today's webinar. All audio is being streamed through your computer speakers or headphones, so please adjust your volume there accordingly. You can submit questions for today's speaker or any technical questions that you have for me by clicking on the Q&A icon on the right-hand side of your screen. There will be a little bit of interactivity during this webinar, so please, at the open-ended question that will be asked, please use this to submit your answer there. You can download a PDF of the slides by clicking on the handouts icon labeled here with this bottom arrow on this slide. It looks like a piece of paper with the corner folded. Once you click that, you should be able to download a PDF of the slides. Today's webinar is being recorded. You're going to receive a link to the recording in a follow-up email. Please allow at least 2 business days before that information is sent. In that same follow-up email, you will receive a link to download the slides and your HRCI and SHRM certification codes for today's event. So it is my pleasure to have with us Deborah Hamilton, Senior Vice President, Chief Learning and Development Officer at Fulton Financial Corporation. Deb brings 25 years of expertise to the education and training landscape, primarily developing programs and strategies for a wide range of leadership, executive development, change management, and professional development initiatives. In her current role, she is responsible for developing a formalized talent management strategy and process, which includes succession planning, 360 feedback, and leadership development, executive coaching, and high potential development. So, like I said, it is our pleasure to have Deb with us. So, Deb, let's get started.
All right, great. Thank you, Alec, and welcome, everybody. Welcome to the program. So I'm Deb Hamilton, again, Chief Learning and Development Officer at Fulton Financial Corporation. Here is a little bit about Fulton, just a brief background of who we are. So our bank was formed back in 1882 by local merchants and farmers, and our name was chosen to honor a native Lancaster native, Robert Fulton, so designer of the steamboat, as many of you would know. In about 1948, we started acquiring banks, and we had consistent growth and expansion and investment in our community. And then in 1982, we became a regional holding financial company, and we also celebrated our 100-year anniversary. So we have 6 community banks spread out over 5 states. Our headquarters are in Lancaster, PA, and we have 243 community banking offices. These are our financial centers and branch offices, and our asset size is about $19.2 billion. And we also have just under 4,000 employees. So that's a little bit about who we are. I'd also like to share with you how our learning and development team is structured. So we have 4 major functional areas to our team. We are the Center for Learning and Talent Development. So under that umbrella, we have compliance and risk management, workforce readiness and advancement, sales enablement and management, and talent management and leadership development. And all of that is powered by our learning services team that does a lot of our logistics and operational design and scheduling and LMS work. So we have a pretty robust team. We sit within the HR team at Fulton, and the work that I'm going to be talking about today is done through our talent management and leadership development function. So today's objective is to share how organizations are using executive coaching. So the focus today, the primary focus, will be on executive coaching. And I'd like to discuss with you the purpose, structure, process, and outcomes. And as Alec mentioned, part of my bio, I started out doing as a principal consultant for about 15 years, working across the United States with a variety of companies doing learning and leadership development work. I then transitioned to the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, where I had the great opportunity to help build the CHOP Leadership Institute, which was new, and also build out and refine CHOP's executive coaching program. So to do that, I met with probably, I want to say, 30 to 40 executive coaches one-on-one, invested a lot of time in getting to know the coaches and understand their practices, their approaches, their tools, And from there, I was able to revise and elevate the coaching program at CHOP. And here at Fulton, I'm again have a great opportunity of doing the same thing, and really meeting a lot of coaches, leveraging some coaches from the past that I've worked with, and just going deeper in understanding how coaching programs can be more successful in organizations. So again, several years of experience with this. I've learned a lot. I keep learning. Really interested to share with you today what I've learned. I do want to, clarify I am not an executive coach, so I'm not considered, a coach per se or an expert in this area, but I have a lot of experience in running these programs, and really excited again to be here with you today to share. So the agenda for today is taking a look at executive coaching, what it is and what it isn't, how it's used in organizations, and we'll touch briefly on internal coaching programs versus external coaching programs. We'll also take some time to talk about process and structure. So how have we selected our coaches? What criteria do we use? What does some of the research say out there about that? What does the process and structure look like for coaching engagements? What are some of the common leadership assessment tools? And there's a new and growing field of coaching supervision. So I would love to, again, share with you what I know about that. We'll transition to measuring outcomes, and then close with looking at some trends and challenges and opportunities in the field. And again, as Alex said, we'll have time for Q&A. So I'd like to start with a poll to just see who is part of our audience today. So if you would just select one of these, that would help us see who's in the audience. Okay, great. So we have the results, and it looks like a good percentage of us are in the learning and development field. We're a practitioner. Some of us are business partners, and we have a good amount of external executive coaches, as well as some business line leaders and some internal coaches. So really nice mix, and again, thank you very much for joining. So let's get started. We're going to go right into the definition and purpose of executive coaching. So here's how we define coaching in-house here at Fulton. And again, we're always tweaking and evolving, how we look at this and how we define it. But we look at coaching as a development process designed to help individuals achieve and sustain top performance in ways that are linked to personal growth for them, the organization's needs, and measurable business results. And when we look at some of the great organizations and associations that are out there, the International Coach Federation is certainly one of those, and you can see how they define executive coaching. So, partnering with clients in a thought-provoking and creative process, inspiring clients to maximize their personal and professional potential, which is so important in today's uncertain and complex environment. So that VUCA environment is what we're all dealing with day to day. So even though there are definitions out there, we feel very strongly that the biggest impact of executive coaching is really the self-awareness that a leader gains, and that is so important. And that self-awareness helps look at mindsets and what mindsets are underpinning behavior. And so we really take the philosophy that coaching is about being who you are, but with more skill. So we find that does settle a lot of our leaders and executives who are being coached and who are receiving feedback, that it's not about transforming, it's completely radically changing who you are and what you value, but it's more about just being who you are, understanding what drives your behaviors, and gaining more skill to build leadership capability. So I'd like to get a little bit going here in terms of how are you using executive coaching in your organization. So we're going to set up another poll, and you can select all that apply. Okay, great. So it looks like the largest percentage is around executive and leadership development, and a lot of the research does point to that. Also, working to address a problem or a challenge comes in next, and then developing high potentials and looking at succession, who are the successors in the organization, and how might they benefit from coaching as they prepare to assimilate into a new role. And then followed by some transitioning into from an internal promotion or coming in from outside the organization. So thanks for sharing that. I'd like to share with you how we use it. Again, pretty much dovetails what we just saw in the poll. We do use coaching here to transition executives into a more senior role. We also use it for development of leaders in high potential pools and succession plans here. So we do use the 9-box. We do have talent calibration meetings. We also are in the process of determining what are the top critical roles in the organization, and those roles would need a strong succession plan, and then within those successors, where do we have development opportunities and where would coaching come in? And then also helping senior leaders close gaps. A lot of this is the inner and outer work, as many of you know on the call. This is the work of coaching. It's the inner and outer work. It's doing that deep work. Sometimes there's a degree of discomfort through this process, but it's coming out on the other end with stronger, again, leadership capability, executive presence. We also use coaching with our leadership development programs. So we have some opportunities where we've built in a post-coaching, coaching that goes along with a program. So if we have a leadership development program, for example, our coaching and feedback program is one, where we do some post-coaching with those participants, and we really find it helps to build momentum. And through that program, we're developing our managers' ability to coach. We're really weaving coaching into our culture, and we've taken the stand that coaching is how we do business. So we are very fortunate to have a strong senior leadership endorsement around this. And we're also beginning to explore peer coaching, which is something that we want to be doing more of, creating the peer accountability, where peers can really coach each other and hold each other accountable. So next, let's look at what coaching is not. And I'm pretty confident you all would agree that it's not a short-term, one-time event. It's not used to fix people. It's not a counseling. It's not just focused on the individual without consideration of, again, organizational goals and results. And it's not just checking the box to say that we've developed somebody or coached somebody, but it's really about sustainable behavior change. So again, part of our philosophy is defining what it is and what it is not. Now, in the most recent issue of Chief Learning Officer magazine, there was an article called What Really Happens in Executive Coaching. So I strongly recommend this as a read. And by the way, all of the resources that I've used to put this presentation together are in the back of the slide deck, so you'll have everything. But the insight I took away from the article is really a coach is often the only person in an executive's life who will hold the lamp high enough for the client to see beyond immediate commitments and goals. So again, I just think this speaks really well to what executive coaching is. And it's not, as we just looked at, a check the box. It's not a remedial effort to fix somebody. It's really about going deeper and getting an executive to, again, kind of look at their belief systems, their mindset, and gain that greater awareness for what they need to be successful today and in the future. So with looking at all of this, we've formed some coaching strategy that I'm happy to share with you. So our coaching programs at FFC are growth and outcome based. So we do qualify the coaching engagement to make sure that we have good objectives at the beginning. We do look at leadership behaviors and business results, and we want our executives to be challenged. We want them to get deliberate practice. We want them to get feedback. We know, again, there's a level of discomfort sometimes in going through the process. It's like an athlete, practicing and working out their muscles. I mean, coaching is the same type of rigorous practice and investment in oneself. We like structure, but we also appreciate flexibility. So we know that there needs to be flexibility in the structure, but we like things to have a process as well. Financial services, it certainly makes sense. We're very process-oriented. We also like executive coaching to be integrated with talent and leadership development. So we've done a lot of work in the leadership development area here at Fulton, where we have our own coaching model that we train our managers on. We have our own proprietary sales model that we've developed that we want our sales-facing associates and team members to use. So whenever we're working with executive coaches, we do ask them to understand what we're doing on the ground, because we feel that if an executive coach can understand all of the tools that we're giving leaders to help them be successful, that they could leverage those tools during coaching. And we also want a partnership-based and interactive model. So we want the coach to really stay close to the HR team. We integrate our business partners into the conversation. So we just like to have that partnership-based. We consider our executive coaches an extension of our team. So we do really hold them to high standards, but we also want to partner with them and help them feel like they are part of our team. And again, everything is under the guise of confidentiality, of course, but just having that partnership we feel really helps. In fact, one thing that we're going to start doing is an annual coaches meeting each year. We're going to get our coaches together and talk with them about what we're doing in the organization, what's happening from a leadership development perspective, what some of our strategic priorities are that would be helpful for them to know when they're coaching our executives. So we feel so strongly about the partnership that we are investing now in having an annual meeting with our coaches, sort of a meet and greet and an update. We also like to measure our coaching. That's a challenge for us, and we'll talk a little bit about that today. But we do like some scheduled check-ins so we just know things are going well. And we like our coaches to be competent, of course. We do look for credentials, which we'll talk about in a minute. And we want the results to be sustainable. So this is a bit of our coaching strategy that we've built and that we continue to refine, again, based on what we learn that works and doesn't work. So next, I'd like to transition to the concept of the internal coaching versus external coaching program. So again, I'm going to ask you just to do a very quick poll. Do you have an internal coaching program? So this is a lot about executive external coaches, but how many of you have sort of a formal internal coaching program? Okay, so we see that about 33% do have an internal coaching program of some sort, and then a large percentage do not. So really interesting results, because as we take a look at what's happening in organizations today, what we'll see is that on the internal coaching side, there's value with internal coaching because internal coaches will understand the organization, the business context, the political landscape, far better than an external coach, usually. Internal is available to levels below the executive level. So this is a big advantage for companies that want to drill down and offer more coaching to that level below the executive or that senior level. And again, can assist with lateral moves and talent mobility in that way. Also, internal coaches are able to support internal leadership programs. I did mention our coaching and feedback program, and what we actually are not using an internal coach to support that, but we have an external coach that's supporting that that particular program. But many companies can use and are using internal coaches to support leadership development on the ground and really, again, build skills that have sustainability and momentum. And growth in this area is expected to continue. So I can speak, on the behalf of what we're doing, what me and my team are doing is, we have a big interest in building an internal coaching program. We're not there yet, but we do want to consider this, and if we do it, we will have a formal development program for our internal coaches. And we would have to define who those coaches would be. With business line leaders, would they be our HR team, business partners, some of our learning team members who have a lot of seasoned experience. But we would definitely put a program together, and we would have a formal program, and we would really treat it just as seriously as we would an outside executive, coaching engagement. So, and on the executive external coaching side, most senior leaders do prefer an external coach. Again, I'm sure you're not surprised by that. It's a safer space to discuss sensitive issues when you're working with an external. The external coach often brings a fresh, broad perspective, which is many, many times very much needed. And it is more prevalent than internal coaching. And when we looked at the poll a minute ago, that kind of does, validate that. So some of these bullets came from the Riddler report, which I'd like to show you. Part of that report is just showing the situations where internal versus external coaching is taking place. So again, here you'll see if it's a lateral move within the organization, there may be a greater propensity for the internal coaching. But other than that, most of these examples are using or prefer an external coach for these other situations. So internal promotion, new appointment from outside the organization, and so forth. So, I wanted to share a little bit of what the difference is and get a sense of who's doing what out there. So thanks for responding to the poll. And next up is, now that we've looked at the definition and purpose of executive coaching and a little bit of what's happening out there, I'd like to take us to process and structure. So let's take a look at process and structure. And again, I have another poll for you. I'd like to start with credentials and criteria. So what is your criteria for selecting an executive coach? And you can select all that apply. Okay, great. So experience seems to be the top of the list here in terms of what we look for, followed by the whole credibility and gravitas, and then previous experience in a role comparable to the executive. So really great. What's interesting is holding a coaching certificate is lower on the criteria spectrum. So I'd like to explore that a little bit with you. One of the things that I'll share with you is how we select coaches. So very similar to what you selected in the poll, we do like to obviously have face-to-face meetings with our coaches, and we do have a protocol of questions that we ask them, and we take the information from all of the coaches that we meet with, and we kind of create a grid, and we start to look at where we have coaching. What does our external coaching bench look like, and do we have enough coaches that meet a variety of needs that we have in the organization? So those face-to-face meetings really help. And again, that's a lot of the work I did when I was with CHOP, is just meeting one-on-one with coaches, getting to know them. Then we do require certification in most cases. We like to have some kind of credential, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. There are many organizations that offer coaching credentials and certifications. We also like them to be qualified to administer assessments, so we take the whole assessment and feedback and all of that very seriously and want to make sure they're using high-quality assessments. We also want them to have, coaching experience, business line experience, and we ask them to tell us about representative assignments that they've engaged in. We also assess fit to work within our culture, and to the degree that the coach wants to be part of our team, sort of as that extended team member. And we're always seeking to balance our coaching bench. So we have, again, a good variety of coaches to meet different needs. And supervision is a new trend in the field, and I will talk with you a little bit about that and share with you what I know about supervision. So this is where coaches are getting supervision. So coaches are being supervised by trained coaching practitioners. So we'll talk about that in a minute. But let me go back to, do you require a coaching certification? So here's a quick poll to see, do you require it? And I think I can predict what the results might be on this. So let's see what that says. Okay, so we have a smaller percentage that says they do require it, and larger percentage that says no, and then some it depends. So very interesting to see the differences in thinking and what this really means in terms of executive coaching, and is it really required? So let's look at some credentialing statistics from the International Coach Federation. So this came from their 2016 Global Coaching Study, and in this graph we're seeing strongly agree and somewhat agree is very high in terms of people and organizations who receive coaching expect their coaches to be certified and credentialed. So the blue bar represents the coach practitioners, and the orange bar are the managers or leaders internally doing coaching and using coaching skills. So there is an appetite from some of the survey data that we see, and this is only one of many studies and research papers, but there is definitely a trend in credentialing. So what does that look like a little bit more? Why is that so important? So let's see. The ICF says, the mission of their credentialing program is to protect and serve consumers of coaching services, to measure and certify competence of individuals doing coaching, and inspire pursuit of continuous development of coaching. And again, many of you on the call here in the program probably are very familiar with the ICF. You probably know they have 3 levels of credentials. So the Associate Certified Coach, Professional Certified Coach, and Master Certified Coach. So our perspective is that, we prefer a coach to have some certification and credentials. We don't absolutely require it. We look at all aspects of a coach's background, experience, and I would say we prefer it. So the Columbia Coaching Certification Program is another one. There's many out there, many certification programs. I'm just picking on a few here that I'm familiar with. But again, preparation and core beliefs around really getting coaches to be qualified to do this very important work. that is a huge investment for any given organization. So another coaching certification program comes from Hudson. Again, this is probably a name many of you know or may have heard of. So Hudson has a wide range of coaching programs. They're based in Santa Barbara, California, and they have an internal coaching certification, which really, again, makes that investment internally in working with internal HR, L&D, business line leaders, and so forth to give them the coaching skills to be able to coach effectively. And they also have an internal coaching supervision program. So that supervision program supports the internal coaching team's, ability and development to really maximize the impact of their coaching inside the organization. So there are many, many fine programs out there. But again, is this an absolute must? No. Many of you are saying this is not required. There are benefits to it. So coaching supervision is new. This is a new and growing trend. So I wanted to share this with you as well, because the Coaching Supervision Academy, which is based in the UK and the US, so they have offices in the UK and the US, they offer a diploma in coaching supervision. So this is really interesting because they've established an international network of accredited leadership supervisors, and all of these supervisors have a CSA diploma in coaching supervision. So they work with coaches, mentors, HR practitioners, OD practitioners, educators, leaders, all throughout, again, internationally, and they have a stronger presence in the UK right now than they do in the US, but they really provide the latest thinking and research in leadership and human development. They also have internal coaching supervision programs as well. They really started their coaching diploma in coaching supervision program, I think it was around 2005. So they've been doing this for over a decade now, and if you're interested in this type of next level, sort of quality, if you will, it may be worth it to take a look at what they're doing. And you may say, well, why is this necessary? It sounds like, is this really needed? So we're affiliated with Mindful Leadership Consulting. They are a US-based coaching firm. And they say that, coaching supervision provides that safe environment with an expert supervisor for reflection, insight, and fine-tuning of executive coaching skills. It also helps to provide sort of a sounding board for the executive coach to discuss a difficult or challenging coaching assignment, because they are out there. There are many tough coaching assignments and organizational dynamics within companies that make the job of an executive coach challenging and can compromise the outcome, of a coaching engagement. So again, just having a sounding board to be able to discuss these challenging assignments. Coaching supervision also provides regular review of relationship dynamics and the highest levels of ethical maturity, with clients and client systems. And finally, it restores the energy and well-being required for top-level service to clients. So it really gives executive coaches a way to get support, discuss difficult, challenges, and be challenged also. So Ken Giglio, principal of Mindful Leadership Consulting, really has a great quote here that I think speaks very well to why coaching supervision is important. And again, all of this information is in the back of the deck if you want to explore a little bit more this area of coaching credentials and coaching supervision. So I'd like to spend a few minutes on our coaching process, and this is going to pretty much, I think, mirror a lot of what each of you may be doing and what's out there. Our standard traditional coaching programs run from about 6 to 12 months. It varies based on the situation of each individual engagement. But basically, we always start with, establishing the need and really doing the proper intake. And then the executive will typically meet with 3 qualified coaches from our coaching bench. We'll do a little bit of a pre-selection for the executive. And we do support the executive when they meet with the coaches. We help them to know what kinds of questions they should ask. So I'll show you that in a moment. Then once the coach is selected, it's the standard, protocol of some assessments, initial meetings, some assessments, a 360 tool, whether it's a survey or interviews. Typically, it's interview-based 360s for the standard executive coaching programs. Then there's the debrief of all of that, and we start to do the individual development plan, which we have our own, we call it a leadership development plan. So we've built our own leadership development plan that we do ask our coaches to use so that all of our leaders are having a similar leadership development journey. So we found that that is helpful, to us inside the organization. And most of our coaches are very willing to work with our IDP. It's the same, IDP. It's just we've structured it a certain way that we feel, really would help our leaders through their journey, and to have that, consistency. Next is obviously the scheduled coaching sessions, working through that IDP, dealing with the day-to-day business, flexibility with any changes or obstacles that are happening within the organization or the culture. This goes on, for a period of time. We like to have the meetings, generally speaking, every 2 weeks to 3 weeks, but we let, the coaches definitely know how to work that, but we like just to keep tabs that things are going well. We have a couple of meetings. We ask the coach and the coachee to meet with the leader so that there can be the three-way meetings and get alignment on what the leader's working on and progress checks. And there's also phone and email support in between the scheduled sessions as needed. We find our coaches are really very responsive and available. And then we look to measure progress at the end against goals. And sometimes we'll try to do that at the midpoint as well, a midpoint check. And then we try to wrap up the coaching with a sustainability component. So as I mentioned, when the executive meets with the qualified coaches, we give them a little bit of a script of how they could ask questions, and really leverage that time with the coach. So I won't read through these. They're in the slide deck. But we do help our executives prepare to meet with the coaches so they can know what to ask and what to look for, and then they can make the best decision in terms of the right fit for them. And then we get into the assessment process. So I'd like to ask you again, and thank you for participating today, what personality assessments are you using for executive coaching? And again, you can select all that apply. I had a limit of how many I could list. I know there's a lot of assessments out there. These are the ones that I think are prevalent. But if you would please, make your selections. What are you using in your executive coaching programs? Okay, great. So it looks like a lot are using DISC or social styles, and those are very comparable instruments. Preference really which one you like. I know there's a lot of use of DISC. Social styles is great, and also the MBTI. It looks like there's a lot of MBTI use, and then I guess Hogan would be next in line. So here's what we use. I'll just let you know a little bit of how we are using assessments. So we use DISC, and the version of DISC that we use Team Builders Plus. That's the company, and their product is called Taking Flight. So we like the Taking Flight DISC. Some of you might be familiar with this. We also use the Hogan. This is fairly new to our organization. We do find that the Hogan suite of assessments are very valid and reliable for leadership development. So that's one that we really like. The Berkman we use a little bit. Myers-Briggs we'll use. If a coach wants to use Myers-Briggs, we're really happy to endorse that. So those are the primary things that we're using. Again, we're not a huge company, so we're kind of probably on the lighter end of the variety of assessments that we use. In terms of 360s, just to touch on that quickly, we have two 360s right now, survey-based 360s that we like. So one is the Leadership Versatility Index, and that is an interesting 360 because it's not based on a 1 through 5 or 1 through 7 rating scale. It's really based on overuse or underuse of a skill. So when does a strength become overused, and when is a behavior underused? So we kind of like that rating scale. It's very unique. And it really talks about doing too much or too little of something. And then we use the DDI competencies right now, and we're using the DDI Leadership Mirror 360. But again, for our executive coaching assignments, we typically are doing interview-based 360s. So we do some of the survey-based 360s for other coaching programs that we're running in the organization that I can talk with you about briefly, where we would use an electronic survey-type instrument. And so the other thing I mentioned was the leadership development plan. So this is just a snapshot of our leadership development plan. We have worked really hard to design a solid leadership development plan that would be thoughtful and nurturing and enriching for the leader to actually think and reflect and think on paper. We have since configured our leadership development plan. Again, think of it as an IDP or an action plan. We have now configured that into our human capital management system under our succession module of that system. So leaders will be able to prepare a development plan, and it will be in the system as a workflow. But what's great about that is they get to interact with their manager easily through the workflow prompts, and they get to have coaching time four times a year. We like to prompt them to get together and talk about the development plan. So during an executive coaching assignment, we may not have that in the system, but at some point we would have the leader, when the executive coaching engagement is over, we would have the leader transfer their development plan into the system so they could start to interact more often with their manager in terms of development and refresh their development plan annually. So this is our standard institutionalized format. We really like it, and we're starting to get good traction with this in the organization. So a little bit more on process, just quickly. How is coaching delivered? Again, this is from the Sherpa Coaching Survey. In-person meetings with telephone and some Skype and all of that. So I think that's probably very common of what you're seeing. We're okay with interim phone meetings and Skype, especially with our location in Lancaster. It's certainly feasible that our coaches would do some of the coaching remotely. And also, what is the cost? This is always a big question, and you can see from this data that there's a huge gap in the cost of executive coaching. This is the hourly, from $150 an hour to $500 an hour. It's quite a range. We prefer to do a contract-based coaching contract based on a fee for the engagement. So let's say $20,000 or $24,000 or whatever it is. We negotiate with the coach based on the engagement and the situation. So we do prefer that over an hourly rate. But again, this is what some of the research is showing. And let's move from process and structure to just measuring outcomes. So I know this is, a pain point for some. I know it's a pain point for us. And just a couple of quick bullets here that I've learned along the way is that the 360 feedback seems to be still the most widely used tool to evaluate the benefits of coaching. And these statistics came from the Sherpa executive coaching survey that I just referenced. So 29% is relying on 360 feedback. Also, business improvement. What was the initial outcome of the engagement, and did that outcome occur? So, was it increased revenue, productivity, retention? We use employee engagement scores because we can drill down to the individual leader and see what their engagement scores are, over an annually or a period of time. Also, we look at changes in potential, the pipeline, readiness, and promotions. So we'll look at our 9-box data and our promotions and so forth. And we'd like to do an impact assessment at the end of each assignment when we can. Again, just themes and looking at the LDP and the different actions that the leader was accomplishing and the different things the leader was working on, and did it meet the initial objective. So a lot more to learn about this. It's not so easy to do, but we are trying to get some good measurements so we can tell some good stories, again, while keeping everything confidential. We're not trying to break any confidentiality in terms of the coaching engagement. So some of the top challenges, we'll take a look really quickly. Measuring the impact of coaching, as I just mentioned. Managing a global coaching program. So for many of you on the call, I would imagine that is a challenge. Best use of internal versus external, we touched on that, and how to do that, how to balance that. Setting up centralizing a decentralized program. What's interesting is Harvard Business Review in 2004 wrote an article called The Wild West of Executive Coaching. So it kind of speaks to what is going on out there in the world of coaching, and how rigorous are the coaching programs, or do they sort of look like the Wild West? So that article, I believe, is still relevant. And just growing the program, how to expand the reach. So one thing we've done is we use a targeted 360 program, which is a very short-term coaching program for leaders who have a sort of targeted area of development. And so it will be usually maybe a Hogan instrument, maybe a DISC, and a 360 survey. And we have an executive coach work with that individual for probably 5 coaching sessions, development planning, 3-way meeting with the manager, and we usually have a nice, tightly packaged coaching engagement, lower cost, but it does really create that awareness for that executive and gives them something really solid to work on. So we're doing a lot more of that to expand the reach. Team coaching is something that's out there. We're not engaging in team coaching yet, but it is a trend. Leadership peer coaching groups are good for peers to kind of be able to learn how to coach each other. And just building coaching competence within the organization, of course, is important. So we mentioned team coaching. So for any of you that are interested in team coaching, there are some great resources here. We've got Peter Hawkins wrote a great book. The Coaching Zone is the art and science of team coaching, really great active podcasts and workshops, and senior leadership teams, development of those teams. So some really good stuff on team coaching. And again, we haven't gone down that path ourselves, but we have interest. And the Riddler report, which also is in the appendix in the back, really puts some challenging questions out there about team coaching. Very thoughtful approach. So I would recommend accessing this report if you have interest in team coaching, because they've got some really good thinking on it. So just as we wrap up, some future obstacles. This comes from, again, the ICF Global Coaching Study. The biggest obstacle is untrained individuals, or more and more practitioners entering the field who call themselves coaches but are not trained as coaches. So that does sort of tie back to the credentialing and the coaching supervision we talked about. Future opportunities, coaches, again, when asked, and others that participated in the survey, really feel that increased awareness of benefits would be a future opportunity, followed by credible data, and again, goes back to how to measure the impact in terms of ROI. But the field is growing, great opportunities out there for coaching, both on the internal and the external side of the spectrum. Here are the resources that I've used over time and that I used to help put this presentation together. There are many additional resources, of course, out there. So I encourage you to dig in and just pick what interests you, of course. And I think that's that's it for right now, and any questions that you have, I'd be happy to answer them.
All right, Deb, thank you so much. At this point, we are going to proceed to the Q&A portion. We have some time for that. So if you have a question for Deb, click on the question icon, type it in, and then click submit. With that, we have a few already in the queue. We have one here. The first one's going to come from Pablo. Pablo's question is, can interdepartmental coaches be considered as external?
Can interdepartmental coaches be considered as external? That's a very thought-provoking. Yeah. And I wish we had a way to kind of throw it out to the larger group just to hear everyone's thought on that. But I would say that there are a lot of possibilities for that. It really depends on really setting up good structure, good rules of engagement. So yes, I think they can be considered external coaches if they're working interdepartmentally. But again, the care and consideration with setting all of that up and making sure that there are really good, clear, rules of engagement, getting some maybe help with that as well would be great. Just knowing, are you on the right track in terms of how you're setting it up, criteria, how you're positioning it, and any of the other things that can kind of get in the way. But yes, I do think that can happen. It's a great idea.
All right. This here is, we get this type of question in almost every webinar we run. And this question is going to come from Brent. So this question is about senior executive support. So we get this, like I said, all the time, and it's about how do you gain your senior executive support. So Brent's question is, how did you gain senior executive support for developing an internal coaching practice?
So I would say organically, and so one way that we've done it is sort of do the work and let the work speak for itself, and we do that in small increments. So, and we do it with a small budget to start, and then we try to build it bigger, and then we try to talk about success stories. In our case here at Fulton, we had one of our senior leaders was working with a coach and came out, and was very transparent about it with others, and that really helped to set the stage to show not only that leader's peers, but also senior level managers to get kind of momentum around it, but also the level of management below that senior leader. So it really started to shape that coaching is a good thing. It's a great development opportunity. So I try every approach possible to get senior leader endorsement. Everything from making a strong pitch around what we're doing and why we're doing it and what it will result in, to sort of quietly staging some things that we know we're going to do on a small scale, and then be able to showcase or talk about results, and to having a senior leader, him or herself, become more engaged, and to keep it going, right? To try to have that seat at the table, and to keep those relationships strong, and whenever possible, create those touch points of why this is so important. And if we don't do it really well, it gets a bad rap, of course. So again, measurement, impact, all of that plays into it, and how to get the attention of senior leaders so they actually pay attention and care and want to read the results. Again, it's all very challenging, but we approach it from every angle. We don't give up. We keep trying to think, what do they want to know? What do they want to hear? How can we show the value of this? What's the financial value of executive coaching and leadership development?
All right, perfect. This one's going to actually kind of tie into that, Deb. This one comes from Mark. And Mark's question is, based on your experience, I know you just talked about some challenges, but Mark's question is, based on your experience, what have been the more significant challenges to developing peer coaching within your organization?
Well, time and bandwidth would be the first thing that comes to mind. So, in other words, time on just time for my team to be able to set it up and really introduce it properly and demonstrate it and facilitate it and then sort of hand it off. So there's all of that work that has to be done when you're working with peer coaching or you're setting up peer coaching groups, because you want to be sure that they're practicing the art of coaching when they're in those peer coaching groups. So it's not just, you know, like a gab session. You really have to make sure that there's structure to the peer coaching groups. So there's time and bandwidth on my team's part to do that effectively, and then there's also the ability for those leaders to commit to attending the peer coaching groups. Now, we find that once they see the power of it and that they're getting a lot out of it, that they're definitely more inclined to want to invest the time and reserve that time on their calendar. But I think time and bandwidth, just, you know, in this fast-paced, you know, world and environment, it is hard to slow down and say, hey, I'm going to go to the peer coaching group because, not because I have to, because I really want to. I get a lot out of it. So setting it up in that way is the best, where people really feel that visceral need to be there and support one another. But again, setting it up effectively so that it really has good structure is important too.
All right, we're going to have time for maybe a couple more. This one's going to come from Amy. Amy's question is, what are a few characteristics of some of the best coaches that you've ever worked with?
I think I like when a coach is really honest and not trying to sell a lot of stuff to us. So I think just that character of really being deeply committed to coaching. I've met some coaches that have been a little bit too forward with all of their consulting services, and when I'm meeting with them, I have a deep interest in trying to understand the value they would bring to our coaching landscape here. So I think one characteristic is just honesty, transparency, and really showing us how deeply they value the work they're doing and how committed they are to helping, you know, individuals get to that next level of their journey. Also, flexibility is important. You know, can they flex to some of the things that we're doing? Can they really adopt some of our internal tools and really take the time to do that? You know, also giving of their time. I've worked with a lot of coaches that give a lot of their time. And again, I'm not asking them to give us time, free, but there are coaches that are so committed that they will apply discretionary effort and they will give you time that you need, and you don't feel like you're on the clock. I mean, when you feel like, you know, every minute you're being charged, you know, for something, it's kind of a little stressful. So I personally like coaches that will be a little giving of their time and, you know, do a little above and beyond. And coaches that keep in touch with us, you know, keep us up to date, because we're busy too, and, you know, we want to make sure those coaching engagements are going very well. So a coach that really can, again, partner with us.
All right, Deb. That's going to be actually all the time we're going to have for questions. We had a lot of them rolling through there, so unfortunately we weren't able to get to all of them. But Deb, again, thank you for taking the time to present with us today. We really appreciate it. Thank you to everyone in the audience for your participation. We had great participation in the polls and the Q&A session. And I want to take the time to thank today's sponsors of this Spotlight webinar at Cornerstone OnDemand. If you could please take the time to fill out our post-event survey, which you will be directed to as soon as this webinar ends. Your feedback is very important to us, and it will help us improve our future webinars. So if you have the time, we would appreciate it. Thank you so much. So thank you once more, Deb. We'll see everybody back here for our next CLO webinar on Tuesday, August 22nd, and that is titled Putting an Invisible Fence Around Informal Learning. Have a great day, everybody.